Hi, this is Pat Lencioni. The video you're about to watch has some quality issues, and we thought about re-recording it, but we really liked the content. So we just wanted to let you know that we've been having some video issues. We fixed that. We've upgraded our systems, but there's going to be a couple episodes that have some problems. We realize that. We hope it's not too big of a distraction. Thanks for listening to the podcast. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, I can do that in 7 minutes every day. And I do. And now I'm going to start adding, but that's my baseline. But I've seen so many things that are totally too much. It wasn't the first simple step. It was the multiple difficult steps. Welcome to At the Table, the podcast that lives at the intersection of leadership, teamwork, organizational health, and culture. I'm your host, Pat Lencioni. This is my co-host, Cody Thompson. How you doing, Cody?
I'm doing great, Pat. Excited for today's topic.
And as you can see, for those people that watch this on YouTube, I have a whiteboard here because I'm going to write something down. But for those people listening in their car or just on audio, I'm going to describe it. I think you'll be just fine.
Just close your eyes and visualize it, right, Pat, if you're in the car?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, just close your eyes. We know you have a self-driving car. By the way, I don't even think we came up with a title today.
I think it's the change equation, right?
Okay, let's just call it that. Today, we're going to call it the change equation. Now, what's interesting about this, one, this is not our material. Two, there's another author, he's passed on, God rest his soul, Bill Bridges, who did something on transition management, which we've used many times. We've done a podcast on that. But I just stumbled upon this recently, Cody, and I can't believe that I'd never seen this before because it goes hand in hand with Bill Bridges' stuff. But it was just a powerful, simple equation for how to get people to adopt change. And what's crazy is when somebody told me about it, I looked it up, and here's where it comes from. So in the 1960s, a guy named David Gleicher came up with this equation. And then it got popularized by a woman named Kathy Dannemiller in the 80s. And then a guy named Richard Beckard and another guy named Reuben Harris wrote a book in 1987 about this. Well, that's the year I graduated college. Well, to think that since I graduated college, and most of my career has been in the organizational space or management consulting, I can't believe I'd never seen this. And so it was just so helpful that I thought, I want to just do an episode about this because I think a lot of other people would benefit from it as well. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, just a couple non-mathematicians talking about a change equation. We should be able to navigate this just fine.
That's right. That's right. I was explaining it to my son. I was showing it to him today, and I was like, see, this is why you learned algebra, because for this, you kind of need it. And that's all. That's all. So the reason why we think this is so powerful, because it kind of simplifies why some change efforts fail and how to go about ensuring that if you want to bring about change in an organization, in your family, in any organization at all, you can look at this and deduce why it's not happening.
Well, and the only thing I'd add to that, Pat, is personal change. Like, I think this equation applies to everything, both as a company leader, but even if you're trying to make a change personally, this equation is going to help you kind of determine where you might be deficient in one of these values and how you might be able to make it more possible or feasible for you to make the change.
Exactly. So we'll put some leaves on this tree after I go through the equation itself. So here's what the equation looks like. It starts with the letter D, which stands for dissatisfaction with your current situation. So that's the D. For change to occur, someone has to be truly dissatisfied with the way things are right now. Okay. If a person is not experiencing that dissatisfaction, they're not going to be interested in change. And sometimes we forget that. We just tell them what to do, but we realize they're not actually unhappy with the way things are. And you have to start there. Right?
Yeah. And Pat, what I love about this equation is as we go through it, the factors on the side that we're going to do this equation with, you've heard this play out in people's own lives many times. Is like, what caused you to change? And they will articulate something like, well, I just hit rock bottom. Well, that's a dissatisfaction with the way things are. And so as we go through these, is kind of putting a few leaves on the tree of like, yeah, I've actually heard people, and I love it's kind of three-dimensional in nature, where one of these could be ultra high and some of the other numbers can be low. And as you sort of tease out the equation, you can see like, how do we adjust or maximize some of these values so that we can actually make real change?
Exactly. And then we're going to apply the nuanced math to this, which is fascinating, super simple, but it's actually interesting. So dissatisfaction with the current situation times V, the V is for having a vision of how it could be better. So it's one thing to say I'm dissatisfied with what's now, but it's another thing to say I can see what a better future state would look like. So that's the V, a vision of a better future state.
Yep.
So it's one thing to say I'm unhappy, but I can't see what would be better. Then you got to work on that and you got to help people with that. Okay. After the V comes, I'm gonna call it an F with two S's at the bottom, which stands for the first simple step. So if a person is like, yes, I'm dissatisfied, multiplied by, I can see there's a better state. The next thing is, what about the one simple step you could take right now to start moving toward that? Because you can tell somebody like, you're dissatisfied and that's how to get there. Good luck to you. And they're like, that sounds so overwhelming. I don't even know how to start. That equation has to be greater than, and when I was first explained this, somebody explained it to me, they had two. It has to be twice as great as the R, which is resistance to the change. So everybody has resistance. We'd all make great changes in our lives if there were no resistance. But there is resistance. So we have to make sure that our understanding of why we're unhappy, our understanding of how it could be better, and then some clarity around the first simple step. If those things multiplied together are much greater than the resistance, you're probably going to make that change. What a great way to kind of diagnose this isn't happening. Which of these three things, the dissatisfaction, the vision, or the first simple step, is not clear? Now, the question, I'll let you answer this, is why is it a multiplication sign rather than an addition?
Well, I loved, like, this was one of the aha moments as you laid out this equation, because anything times zero is zero, meaning that if anything on the left side of the equation, whether it's your dissatisfaction or your vision for the future, or even you have a zero idea of what the first step is, then it nullifies the entire equation. Then any level of resistance would cause you to not change.
Right. Whereas in addition, it would be like, well, let's just focus on the two we can make bigger. It's like, no, all of these have to be present.
Mm-hmm. And so, Pat, I love sort of applying this and first we can tackle organizations, right? We've been through many sort of transformation change seasons of organizations, and we will use Bill Bridges stuff. And I even was thinking of some of the elements we try to help companies rally around as we're doing that. And sometimes it is the first simple step, right? Like we're creating a rallying cry and saying like, what would it mean if we were going to move in this direction as a company? And so even the elements of organizational health and some of the things that we help teams define is, is there some level of dissatisfaction? What is the vision for the future? And what are the steps we can take? And what I love about this is even trying to, not even necessarily a sign of numerical value, but at least an idea of which of these needs attention. Because some companies probably have some dissatisfaction of where they're at, but they have very little understanding or vision of where they're headed. And in some ways, that's some of the Bill Bridges stuff, right? Like, what's the picture? What's the purpose? And what's the picture? What's the future state of all this? And if you don't have that, then no amount of dissatisfaction is ever going to move you in that direction.
Exactly. Now, I would start from the beginning and say, let's assess whether or not there is that. Because the first thing you have to do is you have to get somebody, it's like in sales, the first thing you do is you make somebody uncomfortable about the current situation. Like, you have a problem in your life. And you're watching the commercial and you're like, oh no, I do have that problem, but that's okay because here's a solution, and they're like, wow, that product would solve that problem. And then the next thing is, and if it's cost too much, they're like, for just $20 and 12 installments, but you can pay us now $20 and we'll send it to you. And that's what gets them to go, I could do $20, whatever it takes to get somebody to take the first step, if you will.
And Pat, I will say, when we think about the leaders or organizations that call us for, services, like our consultants to go out help an executive team, a lot of times that first part of the equation, the dissatisfaction, can come about in a few different ways. Like they can be going through an economic, like tumultuous economic situation. They can say like, oh man, we're not growing. We're actually anemic, from a revenue standpoint. Or, hey, if we don't do something different, we might not exist as a company. Or we're going through some like serious organizational change as a leadership team, and it's causing this dissatisfaction with even the culture of our company. So it can be like that. Or it can be, I think there's way more opportunity and growth potential here. Like either of those can be dissatisfied for the current state. What's really unique is we've actually worked with companies that sort of legacy companies that didn't have a real urgency to change. And that quotient was really low. There was very little motivation for them to want to change or move in a new direction.
And we'd give them a first simple step that we thought, well, that's obvious that you would do that. And they're like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah.
Because there's always discomfort in making a change. So to overcome that resistance, that's why we always said when an HR person called us and said, I want to bring you in to work with the CEO, we would say, no, we got to talk to the CEO because we want to make sure that he or she really believes that this is something they want to do rather than they're going to go in there and go, we don't need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things I think is really interesting about this is, because you just reminded me, oftentimes when I would go work with a CEO or a leader of an organization, and they would say, yeah, there is politics in our company, but I don't know if it's worth doing something. I don't know how much time we want to spend. And I would just say, what happens is the first people to leave your team will be your best people because they'll have other opportunities and they're not going to want to deal with this. And oftentimes that would make them go, crap. We have to do this. I can't lose them. I mean, I wouldn't do it to manipulate them. I would just say, well, how would you feel about if that guy or that gal left? And they're like, oh yeah, you're probably right. No, we have to do it. Right. But then I would say, you can create a better team. And I would say, just give us a day and a half to work with your team. And I promise that at the end of that day and a half, you're going to say that you got more work done. And then we'll go from there. We didn't say, here's a year-long process or here's all the things you have to do. I would just say, just give us a day and a half and we will make it so that those people aren't going to want to leave. You'll have a better situation. And then we'll assess after that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I love the nuance you said there because it's almost like the anticipation of dissatisfaction of the current state. You're like, how can I ramp up? Hey, it might be okay now, but think about what this is going to mean 6 months from now, a year from now. And you can even apply this in a personal change. It's like, hey, you're probably not terribly out of shape right now, but if this pattern continues, you might wake up a year from now and not be at the fitness level you want. And so taking some like preliminary action might be the thing, kind of increasing the quotient of their anticipated dissatisfaction.
Yeah. Gosh, I see these commercials on TV all the time right now. And I always thought if I were a stand-up comic, I would include this because it's always some guy and somebody goes, did you hear that Bob died? And they're like, yeah, man, did he have insurance? No. And it's the guy's wife like, well, but you don't have life insurance. And he's like, no, man, what are you doing? And it's like, would you be sad if I died or you just need insurance? It just feels so calculated. But the guy is like, oh no, I don't have insurance. And everybody's watching it going, I don't have insurance either. So that's the dissatisfaction. They're like, did you know for just this much money, you could actually have insurance? So if you died, your family would be okay? Really? Yeah, just call this number.
Yeah. It's funny because I think a similar thing of those commercials that say like, if I did it, you can too, and it's basically like saying, well, if I'm capable of change, even in my, like whatever low bar they're trying to set in that commercial of like, well, if I'm capable of this, even you can do it. But really going back to the equation is like, well, let's identify what made that possible for somebody. Because in the same way, this is what I love about making it a math problem is in the same way that any one of these can be zero, like the opposite is true in that one of these could be really motivating, even if the other factors are sort of marginal. And if you're like, boy, I don't know that I'm super dissatisfied, but if you paint a vision for me that is so compelling and that quotient is 100, then even a small amount of dissatisfaction times that really compelling vision can motivate you to change.
Yes. I wonder if a mathematician would say it needs to be greater than 1 also, because if it's less than 1, it would be just a fraction of it. But I'm not a mathematician, so we're not going to talk about that anymore. But you're exactly right, Cody, and I love that because as long as this is in existence, maybe you push on the other things. And I tell you what, I'm a huge fan of the first simple step.
Yeah.
I think when I saw that, I thought that's so often missing for people in their lives. It's like, you want to be healthier, right? Yeah. Well, look at this person. They're ripped. Yeah, I want to do that. So go sign up for 12 weeks of exercise and do this. Whereas I have to tell you, I saw this thing on the internet, on the World Wide Web, for those people who aren't familiar with technology. And it was on YouTube, and it said, so I'm getting a little older. Everyone is actually getting a little older. That's the definition of living. But I saw this thing that said, here's the minimum thing you should do every day if you're to exercise. And when I saw it, I thought, oh, I can do that in 7 minutes every day. And I do. And now I'm going to start adding, but that's my baseline. But I've seen so many things that are totally too much. It wasn't the first simple step. It was the multiple difficult steps.
Yeah.
And companies sell this way too. It's like, no, give them something they can do where they can see some benefit. Dave Ramsey talks about the debt snowball. Explain the debt snowball and how that's the first simple step.
Yeah, I love that concept because it's essentially like saying, hey, let's say you have multiple debts. A lot of people think, well, we should pay off the one with the biggest interest rate first. Or, and what Dave will say is, no, pay off the one with the smallest amount first. Because when you start to see momentum, so let's say you have a $100 debt, a $1,000 debt, and a $10,000 debt, and you get rid of the $100 debt and you roll that into the next biggest one, the momentum is actually the thing that gets you there. If you start with the $10,000 debt, that can feel overwhelming. And I think this is an equation of human behavior. Like the same way you said, here's 12-week program to get ripped. It's like, actually, no, here's something you can do today. And in fact, I recently, I wish I could remember her name, but saw an interview of an author who kind of, I think, captured this really perfectly. She said, whenever I'm feeling like I need to write and I can't get started, she says, like, oftentimes it's because I think, well, I have a deadline for a new book and I have to write this whole book, right? And she says, if I can't seem to get myself started on writing the book, I'll just break it down into smaller and smaller chunks. And she says, well, if I can't write the whole book, I'll just say, well, what about a chapter? And if I can't seem to get started, she says, well, what about a paragraph? And then finally, what about a sentence? And if she can't even start there, she's like, just write one word. And I love that in the context of the equation we're talking about, that's perfect. It's like, how simple can you make that first step? And that's going to be the thing that will propel you and give you some momentum.
Exactly. So for people that are listening to this, here's the equation again. D times V times F with a SS at the bottom has to be much greater than R. So that means dissatisfaction with the current situation times vision of a better future times a first simple step has to be much greater than resistance. And I couldn't believe when I saw this, like, where has this been? So it's been a long time for me to not be using this. I'm going to start using it all the time. And we hope you can too. Is there anything else we need to say, Cody?
I mean, the only letter we haven't talked about, Pat, is that last one, the R, the resistance. Because in this equation, on the left-hand side, you're saying, like, how can I increase my dissatisfaction? How can I increase my vision for the future? How can I increase the value of the first simple step? But the opposite is also true. How can you decrease your resistance to change? Like, what is it in your life that you're resisting? Like, what are you holding on to? What fears do you have? I think there's maybe some fear wrapped up in the resistance, whether you're a leader or you're doing it in your personal life. So I love playing with both sides of the equation to say, man, what is it? What if the resistance quotient is too high? What are ways that I can overcome that as a leader, where I can overcome that as an individual? And so I think even articulating the resistance piece is really important.
That's interesting because that's like offense and defense. But sometimes if you decrease the defense, the offense doesn't have to be as great to make something happen.
Yeah.
I just thought of something else that Joel said to me today, who's in charge of customer service here. He said, this actually maps onto working genius because like the D coming up with the dissatisfaction is kind of the W. Like, could this be better?
Yeah.
Is this okay? And then the V, the vision of a better future, is kind of the I. Like, come up with a better thing.
Invention. Yeah.
Yeah, invention. And then the first simple step is kind of the GET, like what would we get done? And the whole thing needs to be galvanized.
Yeah, I like that.
Just such an interesting thing. And some people will go, just give me the first simple step. Another will be like, we haven't even talked about why we care.
Yeah, I'm not trying to over model this whole thing for us, but as you were talking, I even thought about the way we present healthy and smart to leaders is we say, hey, here's 2 requirements for success in an organization. You have to be smart. And we go through what smart means, technology, marketing, finance, all of that stuff. And then you have to be healthy. And most of the time when we list the healthy, what's the hallmarks of a healthy company, like minimal politics, minimal confusion, high degrees of morale and productivity and low turnover, that's where the dissatisfaction starts to kick in for them. They'd be like, oh man, I wish we had that, because and then you paint a picture, a vision of what would it look like if your organization was healthy. It would actually maximize your smarts. And then what you've done sort of intuitively is you lay out, well, what does that look like? We go right into the 4 disciplines. Well, it's not that hard, actually. You just take on the 4 disciplines that of a healthy organization, and we start with your leadership team. And so I think that intuitively some of our own, what you wrote in the Advantage sort of maps onto here really beautifully.
And it's funny, before I talked about what we do with our clients, when we have 50 consultants around the world that do this, and they say, just give me a day and a half to work with your team. But sometimes we just go, hey, take this assessment, the 5 dysfunctions of a team assessment, and you'll realize where you have work to do. And that might be what allows the first simple step that allows them to go back and make the dissatisfaction and the vision higher.
Yep.
An interesting way to look at it. All right, that's it today. Remember that equation. D times V times F, with the little s's at the bottom, has to be a lot greater than R, the resistance. And it's a great practical way to get unstuck and work through change. All right, that's it. Thanks for joining us on At the Table. We love it. Remember to subscribe and hit the like button and share with other people if you will. We really appreciate that. And we'll talk to you next time. God bless.